You're just an overpaid babysitter for test tubes. Rita's voice cut through the hallway like a blade, her words echoing off the sterile lab walls and slicing straight into me. I clenched my clipboard tighter, my jaw rigid as I faced my supervisor's condescending smirk. The overhead fluorescents flickered faintly, bathing the corridor of Bright All Medical Center in Memphis in a cold, unforgiving light. My name is Janet Morrison, and at 57 years old, I had devoted my entire professional life to laboratory medicine. For the past 12 years, I'd served as the certified laboratory director at Bright All, ensuring the diagnostic engine of this mid-sized clinic ran smoothly and lawfully. What Rita Henderson, my new direct supervisor, never seemed to grasp was that this wasn't just a job to me. It was the very infrastructure that kept the clinic's medical accuracy intact. Rita, the federal regulations require a laboratory director with my specific credentials for this facility to legally function, I said, trying to stay calm even as a knot formed in my stomach. Without a certified director, diagnostic testing here comes to a full stop. She rolled her eyes in exaggerated disbelief, waving a manicured hand in the air. Oh please, Janet. Any halfway competent technician can do what you do. You sign forms and shuffle papers all day. Don't act like you're some irreplaceable genius. My heart sank. She actually believed that. Rita had been parachuted in from corporate just 6 months ago, MBA in hand, clinical experience non-existent. Appointed as operations supervisor while Dr. Patricia Coleman, our clinic's founder and chief medical officer, was away at an international conference. Rita had corporate efficiency in her blood and dollar signs in her eyes, and my $120,000 salary must have seemed like low-hanging fruit. I'm not trying to be difficult, I said evenly, but these certifications aren't optional. They're part of the federal compliance framework. When I go, the lab's license goes with me until a qualified replacement is vetted and approved. Rita laughed, a cold, hollow sound devoid of understanding. Patricia will be back next week. I'm sure she'll appreciate the budget improvements I've made in her absence. She leaned casually against my office doorway, arms crossed, already imagining the cost savings she thought she was achieving. Face it, Janet. Your time here is over. The words chilled me more than I wanted to admit. As I walked back to my office, weaving through the rows of humming analyzers and centrifuges, I couldn't shake the dread that this wasn't just about petty power struggles. Rita was laying the groundwork for something bigger, and worse. My history with Bright All ran far deeper than anyone in that building understood. When I first arrived 12 years ago, the clinic's lab was on the brink of collapse, failing audits, non-compliance issues, and a string of temporary directors who couldn't meet federal standards. Patricia had reached out personally, pulling me from my role at Kelwind Regional, where I had transformed their lab into a model of regulatory success and profitability. Janet, we serve some of the most vulnerable patients in Memphis, Patricia had said during my interview. We need excellence, not just compliance. Can you give us that? She'd reignited my passion for patient-first medicine, the kind I thought had died out under layers of corporate indifference. In my first 6 months, we passed audits with 0 deficiencies, expanded into molecular diagnostics, and increased lab revenue by 40%. The bitter irony was hard to ignore. Rita now wanted to eliminate the very position that had saved the clinic. She didn't care about quality, only about numbers. These doctors think every role is sacred, she had scoffed in one of her first meetings. In the real world, you cut the fat and improve margins. But this wasn't a manufacturing floor. This was clinical science. Federal law wasn't some spreadsheet line item she could tweak. The Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments, CLA, weren't just recommendations. They were mandates. No certified director meant no testing, period. I'd shown her the laws. I'd handed her our license documents. I had tried everything short of skywriting it above the building. But she saw me as an obstacle, not a safeguard. What disturbed me most wasn't just her ignorance, it was her disregard for the thousands of patients we served. Nearly 2,000 samples moved through our lab each week, guiding cancer treatments, managing chronic illness, detecting early infections. Cutting me wasn't about trimming fat, it was slicing the spine out of the entire operation. That Tuesday in late October, 3 days before Patricia's return, I arrived at work to find Rita waiting in my office. A manila envelope lay open on my desk, and Rita stood beside it with the gleeful confidence of someone convinced she just solved a problem. "Good morning, Janet," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I hope you had a restful weekend. It'll be your last as a Bright All employee." I froze. "What are you talking about?" She gestured toward the paperwork. "I've reviewed your metrics. Your salary is no longer justifiable. The board approved a restructure that eliminates your position, effective today." I picked up the pages with trembling hands. "Rita, you can't do this. You don't understand, this triggers a legal and regulatory chain reaction. Our license." "I've already spoken with HR," she cut in, savoring every second. "Your employment is terminated immediately. Security will escort you out once you've packed." A wave of disbelief and nausea washed over me. It was real. After months of gaslighting and erosion, she was pulling the plug. And she had no idea what she had just done. "You don't get it," I said, trying to keep my composure. "Our CLIA license is directly tied to my national certification. When I'm terminated, the automatic revocation clause activates. The system flags our lab as non-compliant." For the first time, her smugness wavered. "That's just scare tactics," she muttered. "One of the techs can handle the admin stuff while we hire someone cheaper." "This isn't paperwork," I snapped, pulling up the federal system. "Look. Here's our license number. It's linked to my certification profile. The moment I'm removed from staff, the lab loses operational status. That's the law." She leaned in, squinting at the screen. "That's bureaucracy. We'll call and explain." There are no calls. No grace period. Without a certified lab director, we're in immediate violation. We can't legally process a single test. Not one. She took a half step back. I could see the cracks forming in her confidence, but her ego wouldn't let her retreat. "You're exaggerating again," she said, though her voice had lost its earlier certainty. "The lab will manage just fine without you." But I knew better, and so would everyone else within 24 hours. As the security guards appeared to walk me out, I paused and turned one last time to take in the lab that had been my professional home for more than a decade. The familiar sounds of the analyzers, the diligent technicians focused on precision, the rows of samples awaiting processing. Soon, all of it would be swept into the wreckage caused by Rita's reckless attempt to cut costs. The most painful part wasn't losing my role, it was knowing that Patricia would come back to find her clinic's foundation shattered by someone who had never grasped the magnitude of what they were responsible for. I stepped outside, the glass doors closing behind me, and barely reached my car when my phone started vibrating in a near-constant stream of alerts. The federal databases were already processing the change to my employment status, triggering a domino effect of automated compliance notifications. Inside my car, I watched through the windshield as Rita wandered confidently through the lab, likely spinning a tale to the staff that everything would continue as normal. The tragic comedy of it all nearly made me laugh, her arrogance versus federal law. That battle had only one winner. Then my phone rang. On the screen was a name I recognized instantly, Dr. Harrison Blake, the chief executive at Wellspring Medical Group, Bright All's top competitor across town. "Janet," he said, voice tight with concern, "I just received an automated notification that your credentials have been removed from Bright All's license. Are you all right? What happened?" Harrison and I had worked together over the years on a number of specialized cases. Though we were technically rivals, mutual respect had always defined our relationship. Rita Henderson terminated me this morning, I said, my voice steady. She seems to think any technician can take over, and she refuses to acknowledge the regulatory implications. There was a pause long enough for both of us to process what that meant. Janet, he finally said, this is an operational disaster for them. Without your credentials, they can't legally perform a single test. Does she really not understand that she's effectively shut down their entire lab? That's exactly what happened, I replied, glancing toward the lab windows where staff members had begun to gather. I could see the confusion growing, most likely as error messages started appearing on their systems. She thinks it's all just bureaucracy she can fix with a few phone calls. What Harrison said next caught me completely off guard. I've been looking for the right time to expand our lab operations, he said. To be honest, I've always thought Brighthall was wasting your talents. What would you say to joining Wellspring as Director of Laboratory Operations? The role comes with equity and a significant salary bump. I blinked. Harrison, I appreciate that, truly, but I was just fired this morning. Are you sure this is the right moment for this? There's no better time, he said without hesitation. The moment word gets out that Brighthall can't perform diagnostics, every physician relying on them will need an alternative. I want Wellspring to be that solution, and I want you leading it. With your reputation and expertise, we could become the premier diagnostic provider in the region. Just then, Rita emerged from the building, her expression drastically changed, gone was the smug certainty. She was on the phone, pacing, likely receiving the first wave of frantic notifications and system blocks. For a moment, I let myself enjoy the delicious irony. She had no idea the tidal wave she just unleashed. This is surreal, I admitted, feeling something unfamiliar stirring, hope, and maybe a little satisfaction. What kind of timeline are we talking? I can have the paperwork in your hands by tomorrow morning, Harrison replied. Our board approved the expansion budget months ago. Acquiring Brighthall's displaced patient base would fast-track our growth plans by at least 2 years. I nodded slowly, absorbing it all. Rita had cut my position to save money and in doing so, handed me a golden opportunity, and simultaneously delivered Brighthall's entire lab service business to their competitor. The implications were staggering. Not only would they lose revenue, but their reputation and trust among patients and physicians would take an irreparable hit. I'm definitely interested, I said as I watched more of the lab's staff congregate in the parking lot. Something serious was clearly happening inside. When can we meet? This afternoon, Harrison said. Brighthall's going to have one of the worst days in its history, and we should be ready to help those who are about to be left behind. As I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Brighthall behind, I couldn't help but feel a slow smile form. Rita's attempt to cut what she deemed a dispensable role had just become the most expensive blunder the clinic had ever made. By 2 p.m., the consequences were no longer hypothetical, they were being felt across the entire Memphis medical community. I sat in Wellspring's sleek executive conference room, reviewing the offer package Harrison had prepared, when his assistant gently knocked on the door. Dr. Blake, sorry to interrupt, she said, glancing at me, but we've already had several calls from clinics asking if we can take urgent lab orders. Apparently Brighthall has halted all diagnostic testing indefinitely. Harrison and I exchanged a glance of mutual understanding. The storm was hitting faster than expected. The compliance agencies clearly hadn't wasted a second notifying healthcare providers about Brighthall's loss of certification. How many calls so far? Harrison asked. 17 in the last hour, she said. And Dr. Morrison, several of the physicians specifically asked for you. Words getting out. The validation stirred something in me, bittersweet. These were physicians who had come to rely on the accuracy and timeliness of our lab services. Now, they were scrambling to find alternatives because someone in a corner office decided my role was an expendable luxury. My phone buzzed again, this time, a text from Dr. Sarah Chen. Janet, just heard the lab shut down. Do you have recommendations? I have diabetic patients who need their results ASAP. Then another. Janet, what's happening? All our Brightall labs are being rejected, Dr. Torres. And again. Please tell me this is temporary. We have cancer staging panels due this week, Dr. Foster. Each message was a sobering reminder, this wasn't just a bureaucratic hiccup. These were real patients, with real health concerns, now stranded by incompetence. I need to say yes to your offer, I told Harrison, sliding my phone aside. These patients can't afford to wait while Brightall sorts out a compliance nightmare. I hoped you'd say that, he replied, sliding the contract across the table. With your leadership, we'll be ready for those patients tomorrow morning. As I signed the agreement, accepting the role as Wellspring's Director of Laboratory Operations, with a 30% salary boost and equity, I saw my phone ring again. It was Patricia Coleman calling from San Diego. Janet, she said, her voice tight and anxious, please tell me what I'm hearing isn't true. I just got off the phone with our lawyer, he says we've lost our lab certification. What happened? Rita terminated me this morning, I answered quietly. I warned her several times that my credentials were tied to the lab's license. She thought I was exaggerating. There was a stunned silence. Oh my God, Patricia whispered. Where is she now? I need to talk to her. I'm not sure, I said. But given the calls we're getting from doctors, I imagine she's fielding a lot of angry questions. We need to fix this, she said, desperation bleeding through her words. Please, Janet, will you come back? Name your price. Whatever it takes. I took a breath. Patricia. I've already accepted a position with Wellspring. Even if I wanted to return, the recertification process would take weeks. And honestly, the board would need to approve a salary that makes it worth my while. Silence again. And then, I'm so sorry, Janet, she said, her voice broken. You deserved better. After we ended the call, Harrison was already on the phone arranging extended lab hours and extra staffing to handle the demand that was quickly flooding in. Brightall's loss was becoming Wellspring's opportunity. The next morning, I arrived at Wellspring just after sunrise. The parking lot was already filling. Word of Brightall's lab shutdown had traveled fast, and local physicians weren't wasting time. Harrison greeted me at the door, eyes gleaming with energy. Janet, we've already processed over 200 lab transfer orders, he said. Our phones haven't stopped ringing since last night. We walked together into the expanded lab facilities, the air buzzing with activity and momentum. Brightall may have cast me aside, but now, I was about to lead Memphis's most respected diagnostic laboratory into a new era. And Rita? She had turned what she thought was a cost-saving victory into the biggest loss Brightall Medical Center would ever face. I watched as the Wellspring staff prepared for what was shaping up to be the clinic's busiest day yet. The difference from my final day at Brightall couldn't have been more dramatic. Gone were the chaos and disorganization, replaced instead with focused teamwork, anticipation, and genuine pride in their work. Dr. Morrison stepped forward and acknowledged Lisa Chen, one of Wellspring's senior lab techs. We're so thrilled to have you here, Lisa. The physicians have specifically asked for your oversight on their more complex panels. The warmth of the welcome hit me hard after enduring months of hostility and dismissiveness from Rita. Here, at last, was a team that truly appreciated laboratory expertise and saw the arrival of my leadership as a strategic asset, not a liability. Since sunrise, my phone hadn't stopped buzzing, physician offices, former Brightall colleagues, even some of the more experienced techs reaching out to ask about open roles at Wellspring. The Brightall exodus had begun, and it was accelerating faster than anyone predicted. At exactly 9 a.m., Harrison's assistant entered with a curious message. Dr. Morrison, I've got Rita Henderson on the line. She says it's urgent, something about regulatory compliance. I looked to Harrison. He gave a slight nod. Take it. Let's see what she has to say. Janet, thank God you picked up, Rita blurted out. Gone was the smug tone from yesterday. In its place was desperation, fatigue. I really need your help. The federal agencies won't allow us to reopen the lab without a certified director. And the candidates we've contacted say the credentialing process will take 6 to 8 weeks. That sounds accurate, I said evenly. The verification and background checks are extremely detailed. We can't survive that long without the lab revenue, she cried. We're hemorrhaging patients, and the referring doctors are threatening to cut ties altogether. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, voice calm. But I'm no longer employed by Brightall. You should probably speak with Patricia when she returns. She's flying in early, Rita cut in quickly. She'll be here this afternoon and wants to meet with you. We can offer you more money, more vacation, whatever it takes. I appreciate the offer, I replied, watching another tray of lab orders arrive from former Brightall physicians. But I've already committed to Wellspring. And even if I were open to the idea, Brightall's certification status is so damaged now that you'd need to start the approval process from scratch. There's no way to fix this faster. Rita's voice was small now. Almost hollow. Regulations don't offer shortcuts for administrative mistakes, I said. You eliminated a federally mandated position. The consequences are what they are. After I ended the call, I felt a complex wave of emotion, part satisfaction, part sorrow. There was no denying the poetic justice of it all, but I also felt a measure of sadness for Patricia and the staff left behind to endure the fallout from Rita's reckless decision. How'd it go? Harrison asked, entering with a steaming mug of coffee and a grin. As expected, I said. Rita's finally learning that federal rules aren't optional. Well, their disaster is definitely our blessing, he replied. We're already outperforming our annual growth plan, and it's only been a day. As I settled into my office and began reviewing that day's quality control data, I took a moment to appreciate the irony. Rita had tried to save money by cutting my position, and ended up triggering the very crisis that elevated my career to a new level while threatening to destroy hers. 3 days later, Patricia Coleman returned from San Diego to a scene of pure chaos. The situation was almost comedic, if not for the magnitude of its consequences. I got the full story from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a Brightall primary care physician who had recently signed on with Wellspring. She called me that Thursday, still in disbelief. Janet, you should have seen Patricia's face when she walked into the lab. It was a ghost town. No testing, no reports, no revenue. Just Rita standing there with a stack of violation notices, stammering some excuse about why firing you made sense. Apparently, Patricia's reaction was immediate and scathing. Normally composed and professional, she reportedly unleashed months of pent-up fury in front of the entire remaining lab team. What in God's name have you done? She'd shouted. Do you even realize what you've destroyed? Rita attempted to argue that the move was financially motivated, but Patricia shut her down in seconds. You cut the one person whose credentials kept this facility legally operational, just to save money? The same person responsible for generating over $2 million in annual lab revenue? It was brutal. The math spoke for itself. My role cost the clinic $120,000 annually, but the diagnostic services I oversaw accounted for nearly 17% of Brightall's income. Rita had fired a person whose work paid for itself more than 16-fold. When I relayed the story to Harrison later that day while reviewing our newly revised projections, he shook his head. Jennifer said Rita even tried to claim they could find a replacement quickly, I said. Patricia laughed, Jennifer had told me. That bitter kind of laugh that says, you just doomed us. She told Rita flat out, no one is going to join a clinic that just nuked its own credibility. The lab shutdown had sparked a domino collapse that extended far beyond lost income. Years-long patient relationships evaporated overnight. Referring physicians abandoned ship, no longer trusting Brightall to maintain the most basic standards. Insurance providers began demanding answers about the abrupt halt to diagnostic operations. By the end of October, just 2 weeks post-termination, word had spread across the entire Memphis healthcare network. Brightall, once a respected, mid-sized clinic with 8,000+ patients, was now teetering on the edge of collapse. Patricia had convened an emergency board meeting to address the crisis, and rumors swirled of the stark options she presented: either pay enormous federal fines for operating without proper credentials, or permanently shut down the lab and forfeit nearly 20% of the clinic's total revenue. Meanwhile, Wellspring Medical Group was thriving. Under my leadership, we rapidly expanded lab operations to meet the surge in patient volume, brought on 3 new technicians, and built relationships with a dozen additional referring physicians. "Janet, the October numbers are in," Harrison announced at our weekly leadership huddle. "Revenue is up 68% since last month. Patient satisfaction is the highest we've ever recorded." The sense of professional validation was overwhelming. After enduring months of micromanagement and disrespect, I now worked in a place where my expertise mattered. My decisions weren't questioned, they were appreciated. I was consulted, not second-guessed. And physicians took the time to call and thank me for the difference our diagnostics were making in their patients' care. Rita, on the other hand, had become a cautionary tale. Her regulatory failure spread like wildfire, and her reputation as a budget slasher who disregarded compliance left her unemployable in any serious healthcare setting. Patricia had fired her within days of returning, but the damage was irreversible. Brightall filed for bankruptcy within 6 months. Rita's attempt to save money by eliminating a federally required position had cost the clinic over $3 million in lost revenue and mounting penalties. She never worked in healthcare again, her name now synonymous with one of the costliest staffing blunders Memphis had ever seen. Patricia, despite her efforts to repair the damage, was forced to sell off Brightall's remaining assets to cover fines and legal settlements. Meanwhile, I stood in the corner office at Wellspring, looking over year-end reports showing record growth and patient care improvements. In the end, Rita's arrogance had done more than implode her career, it had propelled mine forward in ways I never imagined. And the most poetic form of justice? Watching her downfall play out without ever raising my voice. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is letting the consequences speak for themselves.